The stagecoach rattled into Julesburg, Colorado territory, on a scorching afternoon in July of 1871. And when the door opened, the woman who stepped down looked like she had been dragged through every mile of dust between the Mississippi River and the Rocky Mountains. Her dress, if it could still be called that, hung in tatters around her thin frame, the original color long faded into a dull gray-brown that matched the dirt caked into every fiber. Her honey-colored hair, matted and tangled, fell around her face in clumps, and her feet were wrapped in strips of cloth that had once been part of her petticoat. But it was her eyes that caught the attention of every person on that dusty street. Eyes the color of spring violets that held both defiance and desperation in equal measure. Franklin Norwood stood outside the general store, a list from his housekeeper crumpled in his weathered hand, and found himself unable to look away from the young woman. At 32, he had seen his share of hardship in this rough territory, had built his ranch from nothing after the war, but something about the way this woman held her head high despite her obvious poverty struck something deep in his chest. She clutched a small carpetbag to her side, the only possession she seemed to have, and her eyes scanned the street with a mixture of hope and fear. The stagecoach driver tossed down a leather trunk that had seen better days, and the woman flinched at the sound. Franklin noticed her shoulders were trembling despite the heat, and without thinking too hard about what he was doing, he crossed the street toward her. His boots kicked up small clouds of dust with each step, and he was acutely aware that he probably should have shaved that morning, and his shirt could have used an iron. But there was something about this moment that felt urgent. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat as he approached. "You waiting on someone?" She turned those violet eyes on him, and he saw her swallow hard before speaking. "I am supposed to meet my employer," she said, her voice soft but steady. "A Mrs. Helen Carson. She wrote that she needed a companion and would meet the afternoon stage." Franklin knew most everyone in Julesburg and the surrounding ranches, and he had never heard of any Helen Carson. A cold feeling settled in his gut as he watched the woman's face, saw the way her fingers tightened on the carpetbag. "How long ago did you correspond with this Mrs. Carson?" 3 months, she replied, and now he could hear the tremor beneath the steadiness. "I sent my last money for the ticket. She promised employment, room and board, and $10 a month." The street was beginning to clear as the afternoon heat drove people indoors, and Franklin could see the young woman's eyes darting around, searching for someone who clearly was not coming. He had heard of such schemes, promises made to desperate people back east, money taken and no employment waiting at the other end. His jaw tightened with anger at whoever had done this to her. "What is your name, madam?" he asked gently. "Pearl," she said after a moment's hesitation. "Pearl Winters. Miss Winters, I am Franklin Norwood. I own a cattle ranch about 5 miles west of town. I am going to be straight with you because I think you have been dealt with dishonestly enough. I have never heard of any Helen Carson in these parts, and I know most of the families within 20 miles. I believe you have been the victim of a cruel deception." He watched her face as his words sank in, saw the color drain from her already pale cheeks, saw her lips tremble before she pressed them into a thin line. But she did not cry, did not collapse, though he would not have blamed her if she had. Instead, she straightened her spine and lifted her chin. "I see," she said quietly. "Then I will need to find other employment. Is there a respectable boarding house where I might stay while I search?" Franklin glanced down at her cloth-wrapped feet, at the carpetbag that could not possibly hold much of value, and knew without asking that she had no money left. The nearest town of any size was over 50 miles away, and he doubted she had the resources to get there. He made a decision that would have seemed reckless if it had not felt so absolutely right. "Miss Winters, I am in need of a housekeeper. My current one, Mrs. Rodriguez, is getting on in years and has been asking for help. The position comes with a private room, 3 meals a day, and $20 a month. If you are interested, I can take you out to the ranch today and you can meet her. If the situation does not suit you, I will bring you back to town and help you find other arrangements." Pearl stared at him for a long moment, and he could see her weighing her options, trying to determine if this was another trap. "Why would you help me? You do not know me at all." "No, madam, I do not," Franklin admitted. "But I know what it is like to have nothing and need someone to give you a chance. After the war, I came out here with a borrowed horse and whatever I could carry in my saddlebags. A man gave me work when he had no reason to trust me, and I built my life from there. I figure it is my turn to offer that same chance to someone else." She studied his face, and he let her look, did not try to hide anything. He was not a handsome man in the classical sense, his face too weathered and his nose slightly crooked from being broken years ago, but he had honest eyes and he knew it. Finally, she nodded slowly. "I accept your offer, Mr. Norwood. I am grateful for your kindness." "I have a wagon just down at the livery," Franklin said. "If you can wait here with your trunk, I will bring it around, or you are welcome to walk with me if you prefer." "I will walk," Pearl said quickly, and he understood that she did not want to be left alone on this street, did not want to risk him disappearing like her phantom employer. They walked together to the livery stable, and Franklin was conscious of the curious stares they received. He knew how it must look, him taking up with a woman who appeared to be a vagrant, but he had never cared much for gossip. He helped Pearl up onto the wagon seat after loading her trunk in the back, and noticed how carefully she moved, as though every muscle ached. He wondered how long she had been traveling, what circumstances had brought her to answering an advertisement from a stranger promising work across the country. As they left Julesburg behind, heading west toward the mountains that rose in the distance, Franklin kept the horses at an easy pace. The road was rutted but passable, winding through grassland dotted with scrub brush and the occasional cottonwood tree. Pearl sat quietly beside him, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes taking in the vast openness of the landscape. "Have you been in Colorado Territory long?" she asked after several minutes of silence. 6 years, Franklin replied. "Came out in '65, right after the war ended. Started working for a rancher named Tom Sullivan, saved my wages and bought my first 100 acres 3 years ago. Built it up from there. Now I've got about 800 acres and 200 head of cattle. Not the biggest operation, but it is mine and it is honest work." "Did you fight in the war?" Pearl asked, then immediately added, "Forgive me, that is too personal a question." "It is all right," Franklin said. "I did fight. For the Union. Spent 3 years in the cavalry, saw things I would rather forget, lost friends I will always remember. When it was over, I just wanted to get as far from those battlefields as I could. The West seemed like a good place to start over." Pearl was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "My father fought as well. He did not come home." "I am sorry," Franklin said and meant it. "It was a long time ago," Pearl said, but her voice held old grief. "I was only 14 when we got the news. My mother tried to hold things together, but without father, we lost the farm. She took in sewing and I worked in a mill for a time. Then she got sick last winter and passed in March. After the funeral expenses, there was nothing left. A friend showed me the advertisement from Mrs. Carson, and it seemed like Providence, a chance to start fresh somewhere new." Franklin felt a surge of anger at the unknown person who had preyed on this young woman's desperate hope. "How old are you, Miss Winters, if you do not mind my asking?" 22, she replied. Old enough to know I should have been more careful, should have verified the position before spending everything I had on the journey. You could not have known, Franklin said firmly. The person who placed that false advertisement is the one at fault, not you. You were trying to survive, to make a life for yourself. There is no shame in that. They rode in silence for a while longer, and Franklin found himself stealing glances at his passenger. Beneath the dirt and exhaustion, he could see that Pearl Winters was a beautiful woman, with fine features and a graceful neck. But more than that, he saw strength in the set of her jaw, intelligence in her eyes, and courage in the way she faced this disaster that had befallen her. He had not expected to feel this pull of attraction, this sudden desire to protect and provide for someone he had only just met. The ranch came into view as they crested a low rise, and Franklin felt the familiar swell of pride he always experienced when seeing his land. The house was not large, but it was solid, built of timber and stone with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Behind it stood the barn, the bunkhouse for his ranch hands, the stable, and various outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the near pasture, and he could see a few of his men working near the corral. "It is beautiful," Pearl said, her voice holding genuine appreciation. "You must be very proud." "I am," Franklin admitted. "Every board and nail represents work and sacrifice, but it is worth it. This is home." He pulled the wagon up to the house, and before he could climb down, the front door opened and Mrs. Rodriguez appeared on the porch. She was a stout woman in her 60s, with steel gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and sharp dark eyes that missed nothing. Those eyes swept over Pearl with surprise and not a small amount of suspicion. "Mr. Norwood," she said in her heavily accented English, "you did not say you were bringing home company. Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Miss Pearl Winters. She arrived in town today under unfortunate circumstances, and I have offered her a position here at the ranch. Miss Winters, this is Consuelo Rodriguez, who has been keeping me and my men fed and the house from falling into complete chaos for the past 2 years." Franklin helped Pearl down from the wagon, and she swayed slightly as her feet touched the ground. He steadied her with a hand on her elbow and felt how thin she was beneath her ragged dress. "Mrs. Rodriguez's expression softened as she took in Pearl's condition, her maternal instincts clearly overriding her suspicion. "Dios mío," she murmured, coming down the porch steps. "Child, when did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning," Pearl said faintly. "Some bread and cheese before the stage left Denver." "Inside, right now," Mrs. Rodriguez commanded, switching from suspicious to commanding in an instant. "Mr. Norwood, you bring her bag. This girl needs food and a bath and clean clothes in that order." Franklin watched as Mrs. Rodriguez ushered Pearl into the house with the efficiency of a general marshaling troops. He grabbed Pearl's carpetbag and trunk, carrying them up to the porch. Inside, the house was cool and dim after the bright sunlight, and he could hear Mrs. Rodriguez already bustling about in the kitchen. The main room was simply furnished with solid, comfortable furniture. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and the floor was covered with woven rugs. It was a masculine space, but clean and orderly thanks to Mrs. Rodriguez's efforts. Franklin set the carpetbag down and found Pearl standing uncertainly near the door, looking overwhelmed. "Your room will be upstairs," he said gently. "Second door on the right. It has a bed, a dresser, and a chair. Nothing fancy, but it is private and the window faces east so you get the morning sun. There is a washroom at the end of the hall. I will have one of my men bring up the bathtub and fill it for you." "Mr. Norwood, I do not know how to thank you," Pearl said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your kindness is more than I deserve." "You deserve every kindness, Miss Winters," Franklin said firmly. "Now, You do what Mrs. Rodriguez tells you, eat some food and get some rest. We can discuss the details of your employment tomorrow when you are feeling better. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared with a tray holding a bowl of soup, fresh bread, and a glass of milk. "Come, child," she said to Pearl. "You sit and eat while I prepare the bath. Mr. Norwood, you go find something to occupy yourself. This is women's work now." Franklin knew better than to argue with Mrs. Rodriguez when she used that tone. He tipped his hat to Pearl and stepped back outside, breathing deeply of the warm afternoon air. His foreman, a capable man named Jack Brennan, was walking up from the barn, curiosity written all over his weathered face. "Boss, did you just bring home a woman?" Jack asked without preamble. "I brought home a new employee," Franklin corrected. "She's going to help Mrs. Rodriguez with the house. Her name is Miss Winters, and I expect everyone to treat her with respect." Jack held up his hands. "Hey, no judgment from me. Lord knows Mrs. Rodriguez has been complaining about the workload. That girl looked like she had been through hell, though. Where did you find her?" She came in on the afternoon stage, expecting to meet an employer who turned out not to exist. She had nowhere to go and no money. "What was I supposed to do, leave her on the street?" "You are a good man, Franklin," Jack said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Better than most. Just be careful, all right. You know how people talk, and you bring home a pretty young woman out of nowhere, there will be gossip." "Let them talk," Franklin said. "I know my intentions are honorable, and that is all that matters." He spent the rest of the afternoon working with his men, checking on the herd, mending a section of fence that had been damaged by a fallen tree. But his mind kept wandering back to the house, wondering how Pearl was faring, if she felt safe, if she was resting. As evening approached and the sun began to sink toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Franklin headed back to the house to clean up for dinner. The kitchen was warm and fragrant with the smell of roasting meat and fresh bread when he entered. Mrs. Rodriguez was stirring something on the stove, and she gave him a meaningful look as he came in. "That girl has been through more than you know," she said quietly. "She has scars, Mr. Norwood. Old ones on her hands and arms, like she worked in a place with dangerous machinery. And she is so thin I can count her ribs. She needs fattening up and time to heal, body and soul." "She will have both here," Franklin promised. "How is she doing?" "Sleeping. I gave her one of my old dresses for now, something clean to wear. Tomorrow I will take her into town and we will get her some proper clothes. You will pay me back for the expense, yes, of course," Franklin said. "Get her whatever she needs. Dresses, shoes, undergarments, everything. Do not worry about the cost." Mrs. Rodriguez smiled at him with genuine warmth. "You are a good man, just like my late husband. He would have done the same. But be careful with your heart, yes. I see the way you looked at her. That girl has been hurt by life. She will need time before she can trust anyone, especially a man." Franklin felt heat rise in his face, uncomfortable with having his feelings so easily rayed. "I am just trying to help her, Consuela. That is all." "Hum," Mrs. Rodriguez said, not believing him for a moment. "You keep telling yourself that. Now go wash up. Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. Franklin went up to his own room and scrubbed the day's dirt and sweat from his skin, changing into clean trousers and a fresh shirt. He combed his dark hair back from his forehead and studied himself in the small mirror above his washstand. He was not old, but the lines around his eyes and the silver starting to show at his temples made him look older than his 32 years. What did he have to offer a young woman like Pearl Winters, really? A rough life on a cattle ranch, hard work, and long winters when the snow piled high and the wind cut through every crack in the walls. But then he thought of her eyes, that fierce determination mixed with vulnerability, and something in his chest tightened with an emotion he had not felt in years. Not since before the war, when he had been a different person in a different life. He had thought that part of him was dead, killed by blood and fire and the screams of dying men. Perhaps he had been wrong when he came downstairs. Pearl was already seated at the table, looking transformed. Her hair, now clean, fell in shining waves past her shoulders, the color like honey in lamplight. Mrs. Rodriguez's dress was too large on her thin frame, but the dark blue fabric brought out the violet of her eyes. She had scrubbed her face clean, and he could see the delicate bone structure beneath, the soft curve of her lips, the long lashes that framed those remarkable eyes. She looked up as he entered, and something passed between them, a spark of recognition and possibility. "Miss Winters," he said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended, "you look much recovered." "Thanks to your hospitality and Mrs. Rodriguez's care," Pearl said, "I feel almost human again." Franklin took his seat at the head of the table while Mrs. Rodriguez brought out platters of food: roast beef, potatoes, carrots, fresh bread, and butter. It was simple fare but plentiful, and he watched Pearl's eyes widen at the bounty. Mrs. Rodriguez noticed too and piled the young woman's plate high despite her protests. "You eat, Mrs. Rodriguez commanded. "All of it. You are skin and bones." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, and Franklin found himself watching Pearl from the corner of his eye. She ate slowly, as though her stomach was not used to rich food, and he remembered what Mrs. Rodriguez had said about her thinness. How long had she been going without adequate meals? How long had she been struggling? "Miss Winters," Franklin said, breaking the silence, "if you feel up to it, I thought we might discuss your duties here at the ranch. But if you would rather rest tonight and talk tomorrow, that is perfectly acceptable." Pearl set down her fork and met his eyes steadily. "I would prefer to know what is expected of me, Mr. Norwood. I do not wish to take advantage of your generosity without earning my keep." "Very well," Franklin said. "The house, as you can see, is not overly large, but it does require regular cleaning and maintenance. Mrs. Rodriguez handles most of the cooking for myself and the ranch hands, but she could use help with the preparation, serving, and cleanup. There is also laundry, mending, and various other household tasks. In exchange, you will have your room, all your meals, and $20 per month in wages. You will have every Sunday afternoon off to attend church if you wish, or simply rest, and you are free to come and go from the ranch as you please, though I would ask that you inform someone of your whereabouts for safety reasons. Does this seem agreeable to you?" "More than agreeable," Pearl said. "It is generous beyond what I could have hoped for. I promise you, Mr. Norwood, I am a hard worker. I will not disappoint you." "I do not doubt it," Franklin said. "But I want to be clear about one thing, Miss Winters. You are an employee of this ranch, yes, but you are also under my protection. If any of my men or anyone else makes you feel uncomfortable or unsafe in any way, you come to me immediately. Is that understood?" Pearl's eyes softened with gratitude and something else, something that made his heart beat faster. "I understand, Mr. Norwood. Thank you, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been listening to this exchange with approval, stood up and began clearing plates. "Good, that is settled. Tomorrow Miss Winters and I will go to town and get her some proper clothes. You will give me money for this, yes?" "I will have it ready first thing in the morning," Franklin confirmed. "Get her everything she needs, Consuela. Do not skimp." After dinner, Pearl excused herself, clearly exhausted despite her rest earlier. Franklin watched her climb the stairs, his mind already imagining her in that small bedroom, her hair spread across the pillow. He shook his head sharply, banishing such thoughts. He had offered her employment and protection, and he would not dishonor that by entertaining inappropriate notions about her. He went out onto the porch to smoke his pipe in the gathering darkness, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. The cattle lowing in the distance, the whinny of a horse from the stable, the low murmur of his men's voices from the bunkhouse. This was his life, the one he had built from nothing, and he was proud of it. But tonight, for the first time in years, his house did not feel empty. There was life in it, feminine and gentle, and it stirred something in him he thought long buried. The next few days passed in a strange new rhythm. Pearl proved to be everything she had promised, working alongside Mrs. Rodriguez with quiet efficiency. Franklin found excuses to be near the house more often than usual, telling himself he was just checking to make sure Pearl was settling in comfortably. He would catch glimpses of her through the windows, hanging laundry on the line, sweeping the porch, helping Mrs. Rodriguez prepare meals. She moved with a natural grace despite her thinness, and each day she seemed to gain a little more strength, a little more color in her cheeks. Mrs. Rodriguez took Pearl into town that first day and returned with packages wrapped in brown paper. Franklin did not ask what had been purchased, but he noticed that Pearl began appearing in new dresses, simple but well made, in colors that suited her. She had proper shoes now, leather boots that fit her feet, and her hair was always neatly braided or pinned up. She was blooming before his eyes, transforming from the desperate woman who had stepped off that stagecoach into someone vibrant and alive. But there was a wall around Pearl, a careful distance she maintained with everyone, especially him. She was polite, respectful, and friendly, but never familiar. She never lingered in conversation beyond what was necessary, never allowed herself to be alone with him for more than a few moments. Franklin understood that she was protecting herself, that she had learned not to trust too easily, but it frustrated him nonetheless. He wanted to know her, to understand the thoughts behind those violet eyes, to hear her laugh without restraint. It was a Sunday afternoon, nearly 2 weeks after Pearl's arrival, when things began to shift. Franklin had gone out to check on a section of fence in the far pasture and returned to find Pearl sitting on the porch, darning one of his shirts. She had her Sunday afternoon off, but here she was, working anyway. She looked up as he approached, and he saw something like guilt cross her face. "Miss Winters, you are supposed to be resting," he said, climbing the porch steps. "It is your afternoon off." "I do not mind," Pearl said quickly. "I am used to keeping busy. Idle hands and all that." Franklin leaned against the porch railing, studying her. "Is that truly it, or do you feel like you have to constantly prove your worth here?" Pearl's hand stilled on the shirt, and she met his eyes. "I just want to be useful. You have given me so much, Mr. Norwood. A home, security, kindness. I need to repay that however I can." "Pearl," Franklin said, using her given name for the first time, "you do not owe me anything beyond honest work, which you have more than provided. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to do nothing if you choose. You have earned that right." She set down her darning and folded her hands in her lap. "I am not used to that. For as long as I can remember, every moment has been about survival, working, scraping by, trying to stay one step ahead of destitution. I do not know how to just be." Franklin sat down in the chair beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "Then maybe it is time you learned. Tell me, what did you do for pleasure before life became about survival? When you were young, before the war, what made you happy?" Pearl was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant with memory. "I loved to read," she said finally. "My father had a small library, nothing grand, but he treasured those books. He taught me to read when I was very young, and we would sit together in the evenings and share stories. After he died, my mother had to sell most of the books to pay debts, but I kept one, a collection of poetry. I carried it with me all this way." "I have some books in the house," Franklin said. "Not many, and I am sure they are not as fine as what your father had, but you are welcome to read them any time you like. In fact, I insist on it. Consider it part of your employment if that makes it easier to accept." A small smile touched Pearl's lips, the first genuine smile he had seen from her, and it transformed her face. "You are a strange man, Franklin Norwood. Good strange, if that makes sense." "I will take that as a compliment," he said, warmth spreading through his chest at the sound of his given name on her lips. "And please call me Franklin. Mr. Norwood makes me feel like my father." "Only if you continue to call me Pearl," she said. "Miss Winters is too formal for someone who is living under your roof and washing your socks." They both laughed at that, a shared moment of lightness, and Franklin felt the wall between them crack just a little. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the sun move across the sky, painting the grassland in gold. Franklin wanted to ask her 1,000 questions, wanted to know everything about her, but he forced himself to be patient. Trust was built slowly, moment by moment, and he had time. "Franklin," Pearl said after a while, her voice soft, "why did you help me? And please do not say it was just Christian charity or paying forward a kindness. I have been thinking about it for 2 weeks now, and I cannot make sense of it. You did not know me. You had no reason to trust me or bring me to your home. So why?" Franklin considered his answer carefully, knowing that honesty was important but not wanting to frighten her with the depth of feelings he was beginning to recognize in himself. "When I saw you step off that stagecoach, looking like the world had beaten you down but refusing to stay down, something in me responded. I saw strength and courage and dignity that no amount of poverty could strip away. I saw someone worth knowing, worth helping. And I guess I also saw a second chance." "A second chance for what?" Pearl asked, her eyes searching his face. "For myself," Franklin admitted. "I have been alone for a long time, Pearl. Not physically alone, I have my men and Mrs. Rodriguez, but truly alone. I stopped believing I could have anything beyond this ranch, beyond work and survival. But when I saw you, something woke up in me that I thought was dead. Hope, maybe. The possibility that life could be more than just existing from one day to the next." Pearl's breath caught, and he saw emotion shimmer in her eyes. "I am not sure I am what you are hoping for, Franklin. I am damaged. Life has not been kind, and it has left marks on me, inside and out." "We are all damaged," Franklin said gently. "The war damaged me in ways I am still discovering. But damage does not mean broken beyond repair. It just means we have survived things that were meant to destroy us. That makes us stronger, not weaker." She looked at him for a long moment, and he held her gaze, letting her see the truth in his eyes. Then, slowly, she reached out and placed her hand over his where it rested on the arm of his chair. It was the first time she had initiated any physical contact, and the touch, light as it was, sent electricity through him. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for helping me, for being patient." "You are worth the patience," Franklin said, turning his hand over so their palms touched, their fingers intertwining. "You are worth everything." They sat like that as the sun set, hands joined, neither speaking but both feeling the shift between them, the beginning of something that could become everything. When the evening air grew cool and Pearl finally went inside, Franklin stayed on the porch, his hand still warm from her touch, his heart fuller than it had been in years. The summer days lengthened into weeks, and the ranch thrived under fair weather and good management. Franklin's herd grew fat on the abundant grass, and there were no major disasters to deal with, no sickness among the cattle, no significant predator losses. It gave him more time to spend around the house, more opportunities to be near Pearl. Their conversations grew longer and more personal. He learned that she had worked in a textile mill in Massachusetts for 3 years, operating dangerous machinery for pennies a day. The scars on her hands and arms that Mrs. Rodriguez had noticed came from accidents with the looms, burns from steam, and cuts from broken threads under tension. She had seen girls lose fingers, even a whole hand to the machines, and had counted herself lucky to escape with only scars. He told her about the war, things he had never spoken of to anyone. The fear that preceded every battle, the sorrow of losing friends, the guilt of surviving when so many did not. He told her about the first man he had killed, how it had haunted him for months afterward, how he could still see the boy's face sometimes when he closed his eyes. Pearl listened without judgment, her hand sometimes reaching out to touch his arm in silent comfort. They began taking walks in the evening after supper, strolling around the ranch while the sky turned from gold to rose to deep purple. Franklin showed her his land with pride, pointing out the best grazing areas, the creek that provided water year-round, the stands of cottonwood where deer liked to shelter. Pearl seemed to drink it all in, her eyes bright with interest, asking questions about cattle ranching, about the land, about his plans for the future. "I want to expand," Franklin told her one evening as they stood on a rise overlooking his property. "Maybe double the herd in the next few years, buy more land if any becomes available. I want to build something that will last, something I can be proud of." "You should already be proud," Pearl said. "You have built something remarkable from nothing. That takes vision and determination." "I had motivation," Franklin said, looking out at the darkening landscape. "After the war, I needed something to work toward, something that was about creation instead of destruction. This ranch gave me that." "What will you do with all that success when you achieve it?" Pearl asked. "A ranch this size, it seems like it should be a family legacy, something to pass down." Franklin glanced at her, wondering if she realized what she was suggesting. "I suppose it should, but that would require a family, and I have not had much luck in that department." Pearl was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, "Surely there have been women who would have been interested. You are a good man, Franklin. A woman would be fortunate to build a life with you." "There have been a few women," Franklin admitted, "but none who wanted this life. Ranch life is hard, especially for women. The isolation, the work, the dangers. Most women I have met want town life, society, things I cannot provide out here." "Those women were fools," Pearl said with sudden vehemence. "This place is beautiful. The space, the freedom, the connection to the land. I cannot imagine wanting to be locked up in some townhouse when you could have this." Franklin turned to look at her fully, his heart beating faster. "You really feel that way? You are not just saying it?" Pearl met his eyes in the gathering darkness. "I have spent years locked in factories and tenements, Franklin, breathing air thick with lint and coal smoke, never seeing the sun, surrounded by brick and misery. This place, your ranch, it is like something from a dream. Open sky, clean air, room to breathe and be. I feel more alive here than I have in years." "Pearl," Franklin said, his voice low and intense, "I need to know something. These past weeks, spending time with you, getting to know you, it has meant everything to me. You have brought light and joy back into my life in a way I did not think possible. I need to know if there is any chance, any possibility, that you might come to feel something for me beyond gratitude or friendship." Pearl's breath caught, and in the twilight, her eyes were dark and deep. "Franklin, I am afraid. I am afraid to hope, afraid to trust that this could be real. What if it is just gratitude? What if I am mistaking my relief at being safe and cared for with deeper feelings? What if I disappoint you?" Franklin reached out and gently cupped her face with his hand, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "Pearl, I am afraid too. I am afraid you will wake up one day and realize you could do better than a rough rancher with a scarred past." But I also know that what I feel for you is real and growing stronger every day. I think I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you step off that stagecoach, and I have been falling ever since." Tears shimmered in Pearl's eyes, catching the last light of the sunset. "I am falling too," she whispered. "It terrifies me, but I am falling. When I am with you, I feel safe in a way I never have before. I feel seen and valued for who I am, not what I can provide or produce. You make me want to believe in happy endings again." "Then believe," Franklin said, his forehead resting against hers. "Believe in us, in what we could build together. I will spend every day proving to you that your trust is not misplaced, that your hope is not foolish. I will cherish you and protect you and love you with everything I have." "Yes," Pearl breathed. "Yes, I will believe, I will try." Franklin closed the small distance between them and kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck. She tasted like hope and possibility, and he poured everything he felt into that kiss, every promise, every dream, every bit of love that was building in his heart. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Pearl was crying in earnest, but she was smiling too. "I never thought I would feel this way," she said, her fingers tracing his jaw. "I thought that part of me was dead, killed by poverty and loss and hardship. But you brought me back to life, Franklin Norwood. You clothed me in kindness and covered me with your love, and I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that." "Do not be grateful," Franklin said, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips again. "Just be mine, that is all I ask." "I am yours," Pearl said simply, "if you will have me." "If I will have you," Franklin laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Pearl, you are the answer to prayers I did not even know I was praying. Of course I will have you. I will marry you if you will consent to be my wife. I know we have not known each other long, but I know my heart, and it is yours completely." Pearl pulled back slightly, searching his face in the darkness. "Are you proposing to me, Franklin Norwood?" "I am," he said firmly. "Pearl Winters, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Will you build this ranch with me, this life with me? Will you let me spend every day showing you how deeply you are loved?" "Yes," Pearl said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you. I want nothing more than to build a life with you, to make this ranch our home, to grow old together under these vast skies." Franklin swept her up in his arms, spinning her around as she laughed with pure delight. When he set her down, he kissed her again, sealing the promise between them. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and when they entered, Mrs. Rodriguez took one look at their joined hands and their glowing faces and burst into rapid Spanish, her hands flying as she blessed them and scolded Franklin for not asking her first, and immediately began planning the wedding. "We will marry next month," Mrs. Rodriguez declared. "That gives us time to make arrangements, to get a proper dress, to prepare. Oh, this is wonderful. I knew from the first moment that you two were meant for each other. Did I not say so, Mr. Norwood?" "You did," Franklin agreed, unable to stop smiling. "You were right, as always." The news spread through the ranch quickly, and Franklin's men congratulated him with sincere warmth. They had all seen the change in their boss over the past weeks, had seen how Pearl brought out a softer side of him without diminishing his strength. To a man, they approved of the match and promised to help however they could with preparations. The next month passed in a flurry of activity. Mrs. Rodriguez and Pearl went into Julesburg multiple times, purchasing fabric for a wedding dress, making arrangements with the minister, ordering supplies for a celebration. Franklin threw himself into ranch work, but his mind was always on Pearl, on their future together, on the life they would build. He took Pearl into town one afternoon to see the jeweler, a skilled craftsman who had set up shop in Julesburg the previous year. Together, They selected a simple gold band for Pearl and a matching one for him. The jeweler promised to have them ready in time for the wedding, and Pearl wore a look of wonder as they left the shop, as though she could not quite believe this was all real. "I keep thinking I am going to wake up," she confided as they drove back to the ranch. "That this is all a beautiful dream, and I will open my eyes to find myself back in some nightmare version of my old life." "It is real," Franklin assured her, taking her hand. "I am real. What I feel for you is real, and our future together is as real as this wagon and these horses and this road. You never have to be afraid again, Pearl. I have got you." The wedding took place on a bright September morning when the air held just a hint of autumn coolness, and the leaves on the cottonwoods were beginning to turn gold. The ceremony was held at the small church in Julesburg, with a reception afterward at the ranch. Pearl walked down the aisle in a dress of cream-colored silk that Mrs. Rodriguez had somehow procured, her hair crowned with wildflowers that Franklin had picked himself that morning. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, and when she reached him at the altar, he had to blink back tears. The minister, a kind elderly man named Reverend Thompson, spoke about love and commitment, about two people becoming one in the sight of God and man. Franklin barely heard the words, too focused on Pearl's face, on the tears streaming down her cheeks, on the love shining from her eyes. When it came time for vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I, Franklin Norwood, take you, Pearl Winters, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, protect you, and cherish you from this day forward, for better or worse, in sickness and health, in prosperity and hardship, until death parts us. You are my heart, my home, and my future, and I will spend every moment proving myself worthy of you." Pearl's vows were equally heartfelt. "I, Pearl Winters, take you, Franklin Norwood, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, stand beside you, and build our life together from this day forward, for better or worse, in sickness and health, in prosperity and hardship, until death parts us. You saved me in every way a person can be saved, and I will love you forever for that, and for the man you are." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Franklin kissed his bride with such tenderness that more than one person in attendance reached for a handkerchief. They walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, and out into the sunshine where a wagon decorated with ribbons and flowers waited to carry them back to the ranch. The reception was a joyous affair. Mrs. Rodriguez had outdone herself with the food, laying out tables loaded with roasted meats, fresh bread, vegetables from her garden, and a beautiful cake that must have taken her days to prepare. Franklin's ranch hands mingled with townspeople who had come to wish them well, and there was music and dancing as the afternoon wore into evening. Franklin danced with his wife under the open sky, holding her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the warmth of her body against his. "Happy, Mrs. Norwood?" he asked softly. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Pearl said, her head resting on his chest. "This morning when I woke up, I could hardly believe this day had come, and now here we are, married, with our whole lives ahead of us. It is overwhelming in the best possible way." "I love you," Franklin said, the words coming easily now, though they still made his heart swell with emotion each time he spoke them. "I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person." "I love you too," Pearl said, lifting her head to look at him. "You are everything good in my life, Franklin, everything." As the sun set and the guests began to drift away, Franklin and Pearl finally retreated to the house. Mrs. Rodriguez had discreetly moved her belongings to a small room off the kitchen, giving the newlyweds privacy in the upstairs of the house. Franklin carried Pearl over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in their bedroom. The room had been transformed with feminine touches, Pearl's things mingling with his own, and it felt right, complete. Franklin lit the lamp on the dresser, casting a warm glow over the space, then turned to his wife. She stood by the window, looking out at the night, and he came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly. "A little," Pearl admitted. "But mostly I am just happy. I want this, Franklin. I want you. I want our life together to truly begin." He turned her in his arms and kissed her slowly, deeply, trying to convey with touch what words could not express. She responded with equal passion, her hands sliding up his chest to link behind his neck. They undressed each other carefully, reverently, with gentle touches and whispered words of love. Franklin was mindful of Pearl's inexperience, taking his time, ensuring her comfort and pleasure above his own needs. When they finally came together as husband and wife, it was with a sense of rightness, of two souls finding their perfect match. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, Pearl's head on Franklin's chest, his hand stroking her hair, both feeling complete in a way neither had known before. "Thank you," Pearl whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Franklin asked. "For loving me. For seeing past the rags and the desperation to the person underneath. For giving me a home and a future and hope. For being the man you are." "Thank you for saying yes," Franklin replied. "For taking a chance on me, on this life. For making my house a home. I was existing before you came, Pearl, but now I am living. That is your gift to me." They drifted to sleep in each other's arms, and Franklin's last conscious thought was of gratitude, to God or fate or whatever power had brought this remarkable woman into his life. The first months of their marriage passed in blissful contentment. Pearl took to ranch life with enthusiasm, working alongside Mrs. Rodriguez, but also venturing out to learn about the cattle operation. Franklin taught her to ride, first on a gentle mare named Daisy, and then on increasingly spirited horses as her confidence grew. She proved to be a natural horsewoman, with good instincts and a light touch on the reins. "You should have been born out here," Franklin told her one afternoon as they rode together across his land, checking on the herd. "You are made for this life." "Maybe I was always meant to be here," Pearl said, her face glowing with happiness and health. "Maybe everything that happened, all the hardship and struggle, was just to lead me to you and this place." As autumn deepened into winter, they prepared the ranch for the harsh season ahead. Firewood was stacked high, supplies were laid in, and the cattle were moved to pastures with better shelter. Franklin's men winterized the bunkhouse and barn, ensuring everyone would be comfortable through the cold months. The first snow came in early November, dusting the landscape in white and transforming the ranch into a winter wonderland. Pearl stood on the porch, watching the flakes fall, and Franklin wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. "You regret this yet?" he asked, half teasing but with an undercurrent of seriousness. "The isolation, the cold, the simple life." "Not for 1 second," Pearl said firmly. "This is exactly where I want to be, with you in our home, building our life. I have never been happier." "Good," Franklin said, "because I have something to tell you. I talked to the land agent in Denver last week when I went for supplies. There is a parcel adjacent to our property that is coming up for sale in the spring. 500 acres with good water and grazing. If we buy it, we would nearly double our holdings." "That is wonderful," Pearl exclaimed, turning in his arms. "We should absolutely buy it. This ranch should be something we can pass on to our children one day, something lasting and important." "Our children," Franklin repeated, a smile spreading across his face. "I like the sound of that. How many children shall we have, Mrs. Norwood?" "As many as God sees fit to bless us with," Pearl said, her eyes dancing. though I am hoping for at least 3 or 4. I was an only child and I always wanted siblings. Our children will have that. 3 or 4, Franklin mused. We had better get started on that project soon then. Pearl laughed and kissed him. I think we have been working on it quite diligently already, husband. Winter settled in fully, bringing snow and cold but also a sense of cozy intimacy. Franklin spent more time in the house, handling paperwork and planning for the spring while Pearl kept the home warm and welcoming. They read together by the fire in the evenings, Pearl slowly working her way through Franklin's modest library while he watched her, still amazed that she was his, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had initially been protective of Pearl, had fully accepted her as the mistress of the house and treated her with affectionate respect. The older woman taught Pearl family recipes and household skills, and the two formed a close bond. On cold afternoons, the kitchen would fill with the scent of baking bread or simmering stews, and Franklin would come in from the cold to find the two women laughing together, flour dusting their aprons. Christmas came, and Pearl insisted on decorating the house with evergreen boughs and holly. She and Mrs. Rodriguez baked for days, producing cookies and cakes and pies. On Christmas morning, Franklin gave Pearl a beautiful leather-bound journal and a set of pens, knowing she had mentioned wanting to record their life together. Pearl gave him a shirt she had made herself, every stitch perfect, and a scarf in a deep blue that matched his eyes. "I love them," Franklin said sincerely, holding the gifts as though they were precious treasures. "But the best gift I received this year was you, Pearl. Every day with you is Christmas." "You are such a romantic," Pearl said, but her eyes were soft with love. "I never would have guessed it from that gruff rancher who approached me in Julesburg." "You bring out sides of me I did not know existed," Franklin admitted. "You make me want to be better, do better, be worthy of you." "You were always worthy," Pearl said firmly. "You just needed to see it yourself." As winter eased into spring, they watched the land transform, brown grass giving way to green, wildflowers beginning to bloom, and new calves being born in the pastures. The ranch was thriving, and so was their marriage. Pearl had filled out, no longer thin and fragile but healthy and glowing. She had let her hair grow longer, and it fell in waves past her shoulders. Franklin could not keep his eyes off her. In March, Pearl began feeling unwell in the mornings, and Mrs. Rodriguez's knowing looks told Franklin what he suspected before Pearl confirmed it herself. She was with child. Franklin's joy was boundless, and he became almost comically overprotective, not wanting Pearl to lift anything heavy or work too hard. "Franklin, I am pregnant, not made of glass," Pearl protested, laughing at his hovering. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. I will be fine." "I know, but you are precious to me," Franklin said. "Both of you are. I just want to make sure you are safe and healthy." "We will be," Pearl assured him. "Mrs. Rodriguez has delivered many babies. The doctor in town is competent, and I am strong, stronger than I look. Do not worry so much." But Franklin could not help worrying, especially as Pearl's belly swelled and the reality of becoming a father settled over him. He read every book he could find on pregnancy and childbirth, much to Mrs. Rodriguez's amusement. He prepared the small bedroom next to theirs as a nursery, building a cradle himself from fine wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. Summer came hot and bright, and Pearl spent her days in lighter activities, sewing tiny clothes, knitting blankets, and planning for the baby's arrival. Franklin watched her with wonder, marveling at the miracle of life growing inside her, at how beautiful she was with her rounded belly and serene smile. "I cannot wait to meet our child," Pearl said one evening as they sat on the porch, her hand resting on her stomach. "To see who they look like, what kind of person they will be. It is such a wonderful mystery." "They will be perfect, just like their mother," Franklin said, his hand covering hers. Labor came on a hot September night, exactly a year after their wedding. Franklin paced the downstairs, listening to Pearl's cries from above, feeling helpless and terrified. Mrs. Rodriguez and the doctor had barred him from the room, insisting his presence would only make Pearl self-conscious and slow things down. It was the longest night of Franklin's life. When dawn broke and he heard the thin, reedy cry of a newborn baby, Franklin's knees nearly gave out with relief. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared at the top of the stairs, her face tired but wreathed in smiles. "You have a son," she announced. "A healthy, strong boy, and your wife did beautifully. She is tired but well." Franklin took the stairs 3 at a time and burst into the bedroom. Pearl lay propped against pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale but radiant. In her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, was the tiniest human Franklin had ever seen. He approached slowly, reverently, and looked down at his son. The baby had a shock of dark hair and a red, squished face, and he was the most beautiful thing Franklin had ever seen. Tentatively, he reached out and stroked one tiny hand, and his son's fingers immediately wrapped around his finger with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Franklin whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Pearl, he is absolutely perfect, just like you." "We did well," Pearl said softly, exhaustion evident in her voice. "You want to hold him." Franklin carefully took his son into his arms, cradling the small weight against his chest. The baby squirmed and made small sounds, and Franklin felt his heart expand to accommodate this new, overwhelming love. "Hello, son," he murmured. "Welcome to the world. Your mother and I are so happy you are here." "What shall we name him?" Pearl asked. They had discussed names but had not settled on anything, wanting to see the baby first. Franklin studied his son's face, thinking about legacy and hope and new beginnings. "What about Daniel? It was my father's name, Daniel Frederick Norwood." "Daniel," Pearl repeated, testing the name. "I love it. Daniel Frederick Norwood, you are already so loved. You will never know want or hardship if we can help it. You will grow up surrounded by love and land and possibility." The days that followed were exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Daniel proved to be a healthy baby with a good appetite and healthy lungs. Pearl recovered well from the birth, though Franklin insisted she rest and let Mrs. Rodriguez and himself handle most of the work. He discovered he was quite competent at changing diapers and soothing a fussy baby, and he spent hours just watching his son sleep, marveling at the tiny features, the miniature perfection of fingers and toes. "You are besotted," Pearl teased him one afternoon as she found him standing over the cradle, watching Daniel nap. "Completely," Franklin agreed without shame. "I had no idea it was possible to love someone this much this quickly. Between you and him, my heart is so full I think it might burst." Pearl came to stand beside him, and they looked down at their son together. "We made something wonderful, you and I," she said softly. "Not just Daniel, though he is the most tangible result. We made a family, a home, a life. A year and a half ago, I was desperate and alone, and now I have everything I ever dreamed of and more." Franklin wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "You gave me a reason to come home at the end of the day beyond simple necessity. You gave me joy and laughter and love. You gave me our son. I will never be able to repay you for that." "You do not need to repay me," Pearl said. "You gave me those same things. We saved each other, Franklin. That is what makes this so perfect." As Daniel grew from newborn to infant, the ranch continued to prosper. Franklin purchased the adjacent land, expanding their holdings as planned. His herd grew, and his reputation for quality cattle spread throughout the territory. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable and secure, with enough to live well and plans for continued growth. Pearl proved to be a wonderful mother, patient and loving, singing to Daniel and reading to him even though he was too young to understand the words. Franklin often came in from working to find her sitting in the rocking chair he had made, Daniel at her breast, her voice soft as she told him stories or sang lullabies. The sight never failed to move him, this beautiful tableau of mother and child in the home they had built together. When Daniel was 6 months old and beginning to sit up on his own, babbling and grasping at everything within reach, Pearl announced she was pregnant again. Franklin whooped with joy and swung her around carefully, mindful of her condition. Their family was growing, their roots sinking deeper into this land. Their daughter was born the following summer, an easy birth compared to Daniel's, arriving in the early morning hours with barely time to fetch the doctor. She had Pearl's honey-colored hair and violet eyes, and Franklin fell instantly in love. They named her Margaret Rose, called Maggie from the start, and she became the darling of the ranch. Even the hardened cowboys would stop their work to coo at her when Pearl brought her outside. The years unfolded with the rhythm of ranch life. Seasons changed, cattle were born and sold, improvements were made to the house and outbuildings. Daniel grew into a sturdy boy who followed his father everywhere, learning the ranch from the ground up. Maggie grew into a bright, spirited girl who could ride almost before she could walk properly. Mrs. Rodriguez stayed with them, now more family than employee, a beloved grandmother figure to the children. Pearl blossomed in her role as wife and mother and rancher's partner. She had opinions about the cattle operation, and Franklin valued her input, often discussing decisions with her before implementing them. She kept the books for the ranch, her neat hand recording purchases and sales, tracking expenses and profits. They were true partners in every sense, building their empire together. When Daniel was 5 and Maggie 3, Pearl gave birth to twin boys, Andrew and Thomas, who kept the entire household on their toes with their energy and mischief. Franklin built an addition onto the house, adding more bedrooms and a larger kitchen, and the sounds of children's laughter filled every corner of their home. Franklin watched his family grow with wonder and gratitude. Every morning, he woke next to the woman who had transformed his life, and every evening he sat at a table surrounded by the children they had created together. The ranch continued to prosper, now one of the most successful operations in the region, and Franklin was respected in Julesburg and beyond as a fair dealer and skilled rancher. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Franklin took Pearl on a rare trip to Denver, leaving the children in Mrs. Rodriguez's capable care. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate in restaurants, and Franklin took her to a dress shop where he insisted she choose whatever she wanted. Pearl selected several beautiful gowns, protesting the expense even as her eyes glowed with pleasure. "You deserve silk and fine things," Franklin told her, echoing words he had thought but never spoken that first day he saw her. "You came to me in rags, and I have spent 10 years trying to clothe you in everything beautiful, both material and otherwise. You are my queen, Pearl, and I want the world to see you as I do." "You clothed me in love," Pearl said, tears shining in her eyes. "That was always more valuable than any silk could be, but I will not lie, I do love this dress, it makes me feel beautiful." "You are beautiful," Franklin said. "The most beautiful woman I have ever known, inside and out." They attended the theater that night, seeing a production of Romeo and Juliet that left Pearl dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Afterward, in their hotel room, they made love with the passion and tenderness that had only deepened over the years, and Franklin held his wife close, breathing in her familiar scent, thanking whatever providence had brought her into his life. I love you, he whispered into her hair. More now than even on the day we married. Every year with you is better than the last. I love you too, Pearl said. You are my home, Franklin, my heart, my everything. I cannot imagine my life without you in it. They returned to the ranch refreshed, and even more appreciative of what they had built together. The children had missed them desperately and clung to them for days, and Franklin and Pearl laughed at how exhausted Mrs. Rodriguez looked, swearing she was getting too old for such energetic youngsters. Years continued to pass, marked by the growth of their children and their ranch. Daniel grew into a responsible young man who took his role as eldest seriously, already showing signs of the rancher he would become. Maggie was quick-witted and fearless, able to outride most of the ranch hands and not afraid to get her hands dirty. The twins developed distinct personalities, Andrew thoughtful and studious, Thomas adventurous and always getting into some scrape or another. Franklin expanded the ranch again, now owning over 2,000 acres and running 500 head of cattle. He hired more men, built a larger barn, and upgraded the bunkhouse. The ranch was successful beyond his wildest dreams, and at the center of it all was Pearl, his partner in every endeavor, his counsel in difficult decisions, his comfort in hard times. When Franklin turned 50, Pearl organized a celebration that brought friends from all over the territory. He looked around at the gathered crowd, at his strong sons and beautiful daughter, at his wife, whose hair now held threads of silver but whose eyes still sparkled with the same spirit he had fallen in love with, and he felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "What are you thinking?" Pearl asked, coming to stand beside him as the party continued around them. "That I am the luckiest man who ever lived," Franklin said honestly. "That everything good in my life started the day you stepped off that stagecoach. You changed everything, Pearl. You gave me a reason to build this, to create something lasting. Without you, I would just be a lonely old rancher with a herd of cattle and an empty house. And I would be dead or destitute if not for you," Pearl said. "You saved my life, Franklin, in every way possible. You saw worth in me when I was at my lowest, when I had nothing to offer but desperation and hope. You clothed me, fed me, gave me a home and a purpose. And then you gave me your heart, and I gave you mine, and we built this beautiful life together." "Do you ever regret it?" Franklin asked. "The hard work, the isolation, the sacrifices you have made." "Not for 1 second," Pearl said firmly. "I have lived a life richer and fuller than I ever imagined possible. I have a husband who loves me, children who make me proud every single day, a home that is truly mine, and a purpose that fulfills me. What more could any woman ask for?" Franklin kissed her, uncaring of who might see, pouring into that kiss all the love and gratitude and devotion he felt. When they broke apart, both were smiling, and Pearl's eyes were bright with tears. "Here is to another 50 years, she said. "At least," Franklin agreed. "They did not get another 50 years, but they got many good ones." They saw Daniel marry a sweet girl from town and start his own family, taking over more of the ranch operations as Franklin gradually stepped back. They saw Maggie become a teacher, bringing education to the children of the region while still living on the ranch and helping with the horses. The twins went their separate ways, Andrew to study law in Denver and Thomas to seek adventure further west. But both came home regularly, the pull of the land and family too strong to resist for long. Mrs. Rodriguez passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82, surrounded by the family she had helped raise. They buried her in the small cemetery on the ranch, and Pearl wept for the loss of her dear friend, the woman who had welcomed her and taught her so much. Franklin and Pearl grew old together, their hands gnarled but still intertwined, their hair silver but their love undimmed. They spent their days on the porch of the house Franklin had built all those years ago, watching their grandchildren play in the yard, overseeing the ranch that had become a legacy. On a warm spring morning, when Pearl was 70 and Franklin 72, they sat together in their familiar spots, holding hands and watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold and rose. Pearl was quiet, more so than usual, and Franklin looked over to find her smiling at him with such love and peace that his breath caught. "It has been a good life," she said softly. "Better than I ever dreamed. Thank you, Franklin, for everything, for seeing me, saving me, loving me. Thank you for our life together." "Thank you for saying yes," Franklin replied, his voice thick with emotion. "For taking a chance on a rough rancher who did not have much to offer but his heart. Thank you for filling my life with joy and love and purpose. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Pearl Norwood." She squeezed his hand, and they sat in comfortable silence as the sun rose higher, warming their aged bodies. Franklin thought about that day so long ago when a desperate young woman in rags had stepped off a stagecoach and into his life. He thought about the moment he had decided to offer her help, never imagining it would lead to this, to decades of love and family and happiness. Pearl had changed everything. She had taken his lonely existence and transformed it into a life worth living. She had given him children and grandchildren, had built a home from a house, had been his partner and counsel and the keeper of his heart. He had clothed her in silk and fine things over the years, but she had clothed him in something far more valuable. Unconditional love. Years continued to unfold gently. When Pearl passed at the age of 78, slipping away in her sleep with Franklin's arms around her, he felt as though half of himself had gone with her. But he did not fall into despair. Instead, he celebrated the life they had built together, the legacy they had created. He lived 4 more years, long enough to meet several great-grandchildren, long enough to see the ranch continue to thrive under Daniel's capable leadership. When Franklin's time came, he went peacefully, and his children buried him beside Pearl in the ranch cemetery, under the vast sky they had both loved so much. The gravestone was simple but elegant, bearing both their names and a single inscription. Together they built a life from nothing but love. The ranch continued on, passed down through generations, each adding their own chapter to the story, but always remembering the foundation laid by Franklin and Pearl. The house was eventually expanded and modernized, but the core of it remained, the rooms where Franklin and Pearl had lived and loved and raised their family. And on certain spring evenings, when the light was just right and the air held that particular quality of possibility, ranch hands swore they could see 2 figures on the old porch, sitting close together, hands intertwined, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold. Whether it was trick of light or something more, no one could say. But the love story of Franklin and Pearl had become legend in those parts, a reminder that sometimes salvation comes in unexpected forms, that love can transform rags to silk, that 2 broken people can create something whole and beautiful together. Their descendants told the story to each new generation, of how their great-great-grandmother arrived in Julesburg wearing rags, desperate and alone, and how their great-great-grandfather saw past the poverty to the person beneath. How he clothed her in kindness first, then silk, but most importantly in love that lasted a lifetime. How together they built not just a successful ranch, but a family legacy rooted in devotion, respect, and partnership. The story became a touchstone for the family, a reminder of where they came from and the values that had built their success. Work hard, treat people with dignity, look past surfaces to see true worth, and above all, love with your whole heart. These were the lessons Franklin and Pearl had lived and taught, and they echoed down through the years. The ranch itself stood as testament to what they had created. From those first 100 acres and handful of cattle, it had grown into a sprawling operation that employed dozens and provided for hundreds. But it was never just about the money or the land. It was about the dream two people had shared, the vision of building something lasting together, of creating a home where love mattered more than wealth, where family was the truest treasure. And so the story lived on, told and retold, embellished perhaps but true in its essence. The bride who stepped off the stagecoach in rags, and the rancher who clothed her in silk and covered her with love. Together they had built an empire, but more importantly, they had built a life, and in the end, that was the greatest success of all.